All right, welcome to this explainer. Let's just dive right in by pointing out a reality that is honestly as undeniable as it is mind-boggling. Basically, every historical figure you can possibly think of arrived in this world without a hospital, without an epidural, without sterile gloves, and absolutely without a cheerful machine going beep in the background.
I mean, think about it for a second. Kings were born this way. Farmers were born this way. Even the person who invented taxes was born at home, which, let's be honest, kind of feels like a missed opportunity. But for most of human history, childbirth happened in huts, in courtyards, caves, and crowded rooms filled with relatives who had very strong opinions but absolutely no medical degrees. And yet, humanity didn't just survive, we multiplied. Which actually brings us to a super interesting biological puzzle that researchers have been studying for decades.
Seriously, when you look at the wider animal kingdom, human childbirth looks uniquely, almost suspiciously demanding. Take a deer, for example. A deer gives birth out in a field, cleans the newborn, and within hours that baby is literally up and attempting to walk. Meanwhile, a human baby arrives completely unable to even hold up its own head and immediately demands, several years of full-time customer support. So why exactly is our process so intense?
While scientists have traditionally framed this problem around a concept called the obstacle dilemma. Essentially, it's a massive evolutionary compromise. It serves as the foundation for why our species needed a totally unique, non-biological solution to childbirth. To really wrap our heads around this, we have to look at two major evolutionary developments that were individually brilliant for us, but collectively, very inconvenient.
So picture the clash of these two developments. On one hand, you have bipedalism. Walking on two legs was great. It's freed up our hands for making tools and carrying food, but it dramatically reshaped the human pelvis. The birth canal is no longer just a simple, straight tunnel. Its dimensions actually change from top to bottom, meaning a baby has to physically rotate during labor just to pass through. And on the other hand, human brains got much, much larger. So now you have this enormous newborn head and shoulders trying to navigate this incredibly complex, twisting pelvic space. It's basically like trying to move a live screaming sofa through a narrow, winding staircase. And to make matters even more complicated, human babies enter the world completely helpless compared to other primates. Because of the size limits of the pelvis, a ton of our brain growth actually has to continue after birth. Plus, human infants often emerge facing away from the mother. Now, that's a critical detail. It makes it incredibly difficult for a laboring mother to guide the baby safely, clear the airway, or manage the umbilical cord all by herself. Because of all these factors, the mother just can't safely manage the birth alone. This little evolutionary quirk meant childbirth had to transform from a private biological act into a highly social problem.
Section 1. The social solution. The first delivery rooms.
Okay, let's see how humans brilliantly solved this biological problem. Because if there's one thing we are exceptionally good at, it's solving social problems through cooperation. Once childbirth became way too complicated to handle reliably alone, we assigned the job to the community. Among most non-human primates, females usually give birth entirely alone. Humans? We're the exact opposite. Across all cultures, childbirth is commonly attended by other people. The earliest delivery room wasn't defined by four walls. It was defined by the hands and the presence of others.
Now, the very first birth attendants definitely weren't formal medical professionals. They were mothers, aunts, sisters, and neighbors whose knowledge was built over generations of observation. A laboring woman could lean forward or brace herself against another person. Someone else could massage her back, watch the baby's position, clear the newborn's face, and, just monitor the mother's energy levels. What was required here wasn't a modern hospital. It was deep attention, practical experience, and a beautifully distributed community effort. Section 2. Ancient Tools and Rituals. Gravity and Magic. What's really fascinating about the historical evidence we have is that it completely destroys this myth that ancient women just wandered into the woods alone to give birth and hoped for the best. They actually had specialized techniques and highly practical equipment. Let's travel back to ancient Egypt, roughly 3,700 years ago. Archaeologists have discovered these decorated mud bricks associated with childbirth. This perfectly shows how ancient tools were highly practical technologies. Instead of lying flat, a woman could squat or kneel with her feet raised up on two bricks. This created space beneath her body while her attendants supported her. And most importantly, it allowed gravity to assist, giving the pelvis the freedom to move and expand.
Let's fast forward a bit to the Greek and Roman worlds to see how this evolves into even more specialized furniture. In the 2nd century AD, the physician Soranus described the Roman birthing chair. It featured a seat with a large opening right in the center. The mother sat upright, a midwife worked in the front, and attendants stood beside or behind her to provide physical support. This just proves that upright and mobile birth positions were the historical norm. The modern position of lying flat on your back, that's a much more recent invention. These ancient chairs were clearly designed by people who deeply understood the mechanics of gravity.
But ancient care wasn't just physical. Ancient medicine absolutely loved multitasking. Practical care and spiritual protection were not separate categories at all. While one attendant adjusted the mother's position or used warm oil, another might recite a prayer, burn some incense, or even untie knots in the room, which was this really powerful symbol to encourage the body to open up. You have to remember, in a world without any knowledge of bacteria or blood pressure, angry spirits were a perfectly reasonable theory for sudden complications. These rituals were incredibly important because they organized fear. They gave the community something active to do, providing immense psychological comfort to a very vulnerable mother.
Moving on to Section 3, the reality check, when natural meant dangerous.
We definitely have to shift gears here for a second, because when we talk about history, modern nostalgia tends to edit out a very harsh truth. Natural birth was not automatically safe. It was natural in the exact same way that a hurricane is natural. Most pass without incident, sure, but some destroy everything in their path. There were these severely brutal yet simple complications that absolutely no amount of herbs, prayers, or experienced hands could reliably solve. We're talking about uncontrolled hemorrhage, a baby positioned sideways, severe infections, or rising blood pressure causing seizures. Experienced midwives could easily recognize these disasters. They knew exactly what was happening. But recognition is not the same as rescue. For thousands of years, they just literally lacked the biological tools to intervene when the body's ordinary processes failed.
And that right there is why the transition to modern medicine was so utterly vital. Modern hospitals exist not because women somehow forgot how to give birth naturally, but because we finally developed solutions for those exact moments of biological failure. Blood transfusions made catastrophic bleeding survivable. Antibiotics and sterile techniques fought off deadly bacterial infections. Cesarean surgery turned obstructed labor from a guaranteed tragedy into a manageable emergency. Modern technology didn't make birth effortless, but it fundamentally changed the odds of survival.
And finally, Section 4, the enduring human connection.
Despite all of our modern technological advancements, despite the sterile fields, the surgical lighting, the whole shebang, let's look at what has remained entirely unchanged over the last several thousand years. What survived the transition to modern hospitals is the profound human element. Even under the fluorescent lights of a maternity ward with surgical equipment beeping and monitors tracking every single vital sign, a laboring woman still looks for a familiar voice. She still reaches out for a hand to hold. She still relies on someone to tell her when to breathe, when to rest, and to remind her that she is stronger than she feels right now. That core need for emotional and physical support from another human being, it's exactly the same today as it was when childbirth happened on ancient mud bricks.
I want to leave you with this really powerful thought. Human childbirth became survivable, not through biology alone, but through unparalleled cooperation. Our ancestors met evolution's most dangerous challenge by flatly refusing to face it alone. That was our greatest survival strategy then, and if you walk into any modern hospital room around the world today, it remains our greatest survival strategy right now. So the next time you think about human evolution, ask yourself, how many other impossible challenges could we overcome if we just remembered to face them together?